Good morning, Modern What a Horda. You are waking up to R&AM. It's Friday, the 23rd of August, otherwise known as Leaving Cert Results Day. So we want to start by wishing all the students receiving their results today the very best of luck.
Oh, the PTSD I'm feeling right now. Anyway, speaking of the Leaving Cert, it has been reported today that the majority of this year's grades have been artificially inflated. We'll reveal what your morning papers are saying.
And we'll be looking back at last night's massive night of European football for Irish teams later this hour. We'll have all of your Friday sports news.
And as the Leaving Certificate results come out, we'll have advice for students and parents on how to celebrate safely and sensibly tonight.
Plus, he's performed with acts such as Tommy Tiernan, John Bishop, Russell Howard, Jason Byrne, just to name a few. Comedian Eric Lalor will be stopping by.
And nearly 30 years ago, he went boldly.
It's trekkers.
Yes. I don't get it.
Live long and prosper,
Come on, Louise,
people.
do this. No, OK, she's doing
Ice Girl?
peace. We will teach her how to do this.
We will, if I have taught Síomha, I shall teach you.
Yes,
Don't you worry.
yes, she's
It's all
mouldable.
ahead of you.
I feel I should have something to quote here. Follow the light or through the portal.
We shall inform
we'll
her.
leave there for
Yes,
the moment, yeah.
yes, that's all to come between now and 10.
Now, it is a mixed bag across your morning papers. We'll start with the Irish Times, which leads with majority of Leaving Cert grades artificially inflated. The paper reports that most of this year's Leaving Cert students have been artificially inflated by exam authorities to bring them into line with record highs of recent years.
The Irish Independent leads with Senior Gardai face down McEntee in row over top job. The paper reports that Senior Gardai have sought to face down Justice Minister Helen McEntee in a row over pension rules that has caused chaos in filling the role of Deputy Commissioner.
We are forgotten about. We have no one to turn to. That is the lead in the Irish Examiner. It's reporting that parents and students of St Killian's Special School have demanded the government restore therapeutic services to their Cork school.
On to the tabloids now, and the Daily Mail leads with move on land tax needed to save budget. The paper reports that the race is on to solve the crisis in the coalition over the controversial shelving of the land hoarding tax, which could jeopardise the giveaway budget. The paper also carries a photograph of Match of the Day and the One Show presenter Jermaine Jenas, who has been sacked by the BBC over inappropriate texts to a colleague.
Revealed, that's the front page with the Irish Daily Mirror. The paper reports that triple killer Samir Saeed took his own life just hours after he was told he was fit to stand trial for the murder of his wife and children.
The Sun leads with It's Showtime, reporting that broadcaster Gráinne Seoige has bagged enough nominations from Fianna Fáil members to be a party candidate at the next general election.
Knock Enoch, who's there, is the lead in the Irish Daily Star. It's reporting that Enoch Burke has returned to a secondary school in Westmeath despite losing a High Court action aimed at setting aside an order for him to stay away.
And finally, the Herald leads with 7-man gang of burglars hit Dublin home. The paper carries a story of a Dublin family who have told how a gang of 7 masked intruders tried to burgle their home yesterday.
And today marks Leaving Cert Results Day, so we want to hear from you. Send us in your memories from the day you collected your results. Or do you think the whole exam is just outdated and there should be another way to grade students? Do let us know what's on your mind.
Yes, 0896 111 111.
Leaving
Well,
Cert Results Day.
Yes.
Do you remember it well?
Yes, it was
I
my
remember.
birthday.
Oh, what? That's rough.
my birthday.
And was
It
it
was rough.
was it a double celebration or was it a
No.
celebration and a commiseration?
I cried all day long.
No, it's an awful stress, isn't it? I remember I wore red jeans. It was really warm. Do you remember when red jeans were a thing?
I do.
And I sat outside waiting to collect my results.
like-
And the dye from the red jeans leaked, which, you know, through the sweat and everything onto my legs. So I had to go out Leaving Cert Results night with the luminous red.
She's like Father Dougal. I was wearing my red jeans.
That's not a bad memory. Much better than
Do you know
bawling
what? I
crying all day,
remember
really.
occasions by what I was wearing. Does anyone else?
Father
I really
Dougal.
do.
Father
Yeah,
Dougal.
Dougal.
How about
Exactly.
you?
So the day was great, and then the night I absolutely didn't leave the house. I didn't make it out past pre-drinks.
Why?
What do you think?
much
Like I
fun.
overindulged. Yeah, I
a
did.
little appetite.
I actually did really. I did quite well on my Leaving Cert. Fat lot of good that did me. No sense, no logic. Couldn't handle the excitement of the night. Everyone else went off to the nightclub, and I had to be put to bed.
Oh, Síomha O'Rourke. Some things, the more things change, the more they say the same. Is that what they say?
Have you stories about electric picnic to share from last
we absolutely
I think it's a different show, is it?
That's Ireland
Not this
PM.
hour of the morning.
Oh, anyway, so keep them coming. Let us know your Leaving Cert stories. Did your legs get dyed a funny colour? Any other part of you, did you actually make it out that night? 0896 111 111. Now, speaking of the Leaving Cert, it's been reported today that the majority of this year's grades have been artificially inflated once again. We'll reveal what your morning papers are saying next. You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. Senior Gardai are facing down the Justice Minister in a row over the role of Deputy Commissioner. Joining us to review your morning papers are Síomha Cahill, Account Director of DHR Communications, and Owen Tomas McDermott, even, excuse me, Managing Director of the Communications Clinic. Sorry, my coffee went down the wrong way just there.
It's early.
I have another little sip now and we'll all get cracking. But Owen, this story about the pensions and the Deputy Commissioner row, it's rumbling on again. Just for anyone who's not familiar with it, what's going on?
Yeah, so the position of Deputy Commissioner for Policing Operations and National Security was freed up in March 23, so a year and a half ago. The competition was opened, and last October they couldn't find any position or any person to fill the position because nobody applied. So people might ask, well, why did the assistant commissioners, for example, who would be next in the rank, why didn't they apply for it? And as it turns out, it is a pension anomaly that has occurred. So there is a thing called the standard fund threshold, which is essentially the ceiling that when you pass through that or go over that ceiling with your pension pot, you are no longer tax relief, or tax relief doesn't apply to you. So it becomes very expensive. And if you think about it from these guards' experience, and they are career Gardaí who are impacted by it, they have been in the service for a particularly long period of time. So the pot has been increasing gradually anyway, their pension pot. They then get this promotion which increases the pension contributions and increases the salary. So more money goes into the pension pot and then it begins to flow over. So their argument is, why would we apply for a job and a promotion when we actually are going to end up losing much of our pension benefits? So that is the issue. Now, part of the controversy is coming in that Michael McGrath last December did a review into this issue, and several weeks ago the findings of that review were given to Jack Chambers, and nothing has happened since. And Helen McEntee's argument is we can't do anything about this because it is a tax-related issue, and so the solution won't happen until the budget is done in September. Having said all of that, the job has been reopened and the closing date is next Thursday. And so the expectation now is, well, we're not going to be able to get any applicants for this this post as we go through.
Unless they're already a very small pension pot to begin with.
Well, that's it. And it's worth having a quick look at the structure of Gardaí. You have Drew Harris at the top commissioner. You then have 2 deputies and 8 assistant commissioners. So there are 6 serving commissioners who are career Gardaí. They're not going to apply, but there are 2 people who have been former PSNI who could still apply for it. So the competition is open, but it's going to cause an issue for Gardaí. It's causing an issue for Helen McEntee, and the worrying thing is it could cause an issue for national security.
Because there's no one to fill these very important jobs. Well, there is, but they just don't want to because
get the CV out, Elaine. The job is open. Do you know what I mean? They're baying for people.
I am a TV presenter. I shall stay a TV presenter. I do not have any notions in any other way, shape or form, let me tell you. I'll stay in my lane. Now, when it comes to this, so it just seemed to me that, reading in, that the money they're on, their pension is so good as it stands that if it goes higher, they'll lose more money. Because, in fairness, the old structure of the Guard, the pensions were fairly good. I'm not sure what it's like now, but Fado wasn't bad at all.
Asher, look, Elaine, I think this is the story. I mean, it's rolled on for the last number of weeks, months, and I suppose it's of most interest to people who are concerned about top Gardaí pensions more than anything else. I think most people will be looking more at, the drop in the numbers in the roads policing unit and other issues with An Garda Síochána. I think it is a bit of a mess for government, but I think the Irish Independent had a bit of crack with referring to it as chaos and a face down with Minister Helen McEntee. It's certainly a row, that's for sure, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The reality is that position needs to be filled. It's a very top level position. And it's going to be interesting if anyone outside of the Republic of Ireland applies for it, because they wouldn't be impacted by the pension rules.
Because basically, if they work for the PSNI, they'd be able to do it.
Yeah, which you can then imagine would have an impact on morale of that senior group who all
already
think they're competent to go into
it,
and then somebody else gets parachuted in to fill that position because their pension isn't going to be impacted by it.
In the Daily Mail, we have another headline today: Move on land tax needed to save budget. Now, this I suppose the crux of this, Sienna, is the housing crisis and what should be done to help alleviate it. And there's many parcels of land that many developers are sitting on. They're not doing anything with it, and the penalties that therefore should be levied against them.
It has all the hallmarks, as Jennifer Bray in the Irish Times
of a Hollywood blockbuster, the excitement.
Of a Hollywood blockbuster, no, of a silly season spat, as Jennifer Bray said in the Irish Times. I mean, you've got everything. You've got the Greens versus Fianna Fáil, and you've got farmers.
Dun.
I mean, what else would you need? So obviously, this is
is, joking aside, the reality of we're sitting in a housing crisis, and there was land zoned for housing development, which now people are saying, and those farmers who have land in those areas are saying, you know, there's going to be no housing development on them, and we shouldn't be impacted by any land hoarding tax. So obviously we're coming up to, apparently not, a November election.
I wonder what date in November the election will be that everybody knows about already.
The greatest shock to nobody, but in this lead-in, you know, this is the kind of stuff that's really going to be being chewed over, and this is a significant row, I think, between the Greens and particularly Fianna Fáil. I mean, Jack Chambers, Minister for Finance, yesterday saying that the land hoarding tax would be delayed until next year. Minister Oisin Smith, then from the Greens, very, very clearly laying out a strong stall from the Greens, saying absolutely not, we're going ahead with this because there are thousands of housing developments kind of on the line, impacted potentially by land zoned for housing. Obviously, Fianna Fáil in particular will be mindful of the impact that this might have on any farming communities who would be impacted by a tax on their land. But I don't think there's a simple solution in the time frame that we're looking at coming up to a general election. No. That's the difficulty. And so it will be interesting to see how this plays out between the Greens and Fianna Fáil.
And of course, Leaving Cert's all over the papers today. We all remember the fateful day we got our Leaving Cert results. But once again, Owen, the results are artificially inflated, and this is, of course, a throwback to COVID times.
Yeah, so this was flagged by the Minister, in fairness to her, back in April, where they had alerted that this was going to be the final year, really, where the grades would be elevated to such a point that would be similar to what went on with COVID. Because people will remember in the 2020 Leaving Cert, for example, it was the predicted grades and the assessed grades which led to an element of elevation. In 2021, there was an option of sitting the paper or having a combination of elevated grades and the sitting of the paper. So that again led to the marks being raised as well. So this is the argument from Minister Foley is this is about fairness in relation to this cohort of students, because many of them wouldn't have sat the junior cert, for example, so still would have been impacted by the disruption that would have happened during COVID. So it is in some ways a fairness argument that they were making. The higher education bodies and the likes of the universities are saying this is not particularly good for them because it's making it difficult for them to really differentiate academic achievement, and this is kind of disrupting true academic achievement, which one could argue it is, and it's also then distorting what is going to happen in the CAO, which is going to make it difficult for them to place all of these students, which ultimately will be difficult for the students because for those really good high achievers, some of the selections are going to be done by random selection.
Nobody really wants, really, when it comes to that, because if you have a level where the points and maybe some students deserve it for their academic achievement, if everybody gets over a certain level, boom, picking out of a hat, literally, which is not fair to anyone. Now, if thinking of your Leaving Cert results, throw yourself back. Do you remember the day?
I feel like a tingle of stress.
I can actually see.
Yeah, like it was very. The big thing was I really wanted to do well in English, and I really, really needed to pass maths, and that was a big fear. And I didn't think...
Oh my God, I think I'm talking to the same...
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to do it. And I got the result I wanted in English. And it's like the world around me fuzzed up, and I ran to my English teacher's classroom, because they were all kind of in their classrooms. You could go and meet them.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Yeah. And I was like, Miss Gaffney, I was like, I did it. And like, look I mean, this is such a scary morning for so many families, and they're going to have this on in the sitting room and in the kitchen, and we're going to be chatting about inflated grades. You know, no grade you get today, obviously, and you're going to be hearing about this all day, is a measure of you as a person. And today is a very stressful day, and we all have different ways of managing that stress. And I mean, I wasn't a going out kind of person. I was the most awkward woman in the club that night after the Leaving Cert.
Did you have sandals and socks on? That is the question.
Did I have sandals and socks? Yeah. These are because I'm so fashionable.
Yeah.
You're jealous, I'd say, Owen. Did you have sandals and socks on for your Leaving Cert?
You should have done
this.
Well,
I actually had red jeans on that day as well.
This is for my father, Mick Cahill. His birthday's coming up, and he wears it all the time.
Really? Well...
can see why. Comfort.
Right.
I know, it's comfort.
I see.
And this is where
a good Leaving Cert
gets you.
It was 23 years ago. Which was the bit that led to the anxiety for me, which was, I can't believe it's 23 years ago.
Oh, wait, do you want to find out how long ago mine was?
And we're doing all right. We're doing all right.
Thank you both very much for joining us on the show today. Now, for the first time, 2 Irish clubs reached European playoffs in the same year. We're talking sport next.
Welcome back. Never before have 2 clubs from these shores reached European playoffs in the same year. But last night, Shamrock Rovers and St Patrick's Athletic made history.
Here to chat about how they got on, as well as the rest of today's big sports stories, is Daniel Hussey, presenter of the Tactic Sport podcast. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, guys. How are we?
Great to see you. So let's start with the Europa League playoff and PAOK versus Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah.
Disappointing night for Shamrock Rovers last night.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate because they actually played. It's hard to put into when you lose 4-0, you never played well. But in the first half, they were about 30 seconds away from getting in a half-time 0-0, and in those sort of games, you can easily dig out a 0-0 from there. But like you can see the goal here right before half-time, own goal, diving header own goal, which never helps you from a cross like that, Dan Cleary. So it was just a sickening blow, and they couldn't recover from that. And you saw the gulf in class with the 2 sides in the second half, and that gulf was always there. But in a game like that, you can easily get a 0-0 or 1-0 to bring back to Tallaght. So in some ways, it makes the decision for Shamrock Rovers. For those that don't know, this was the Europa League playoff, so they now lose that game but go into the group stage of the Conference League, which is the 3rd tier of European, which is brilliant. We're the 5th side ever to reach, 5th Irish team ever to reach the European group stages, and hopefully Pats, which will get on to do that in the second leg. But yeah, disappointing night, but look, Rovers will have their sights potentially on a league title because they're still sort of in the title race, but then they're going to have 8 guaranteed European games in Europe, which is great, obviously.
Still a massive game, though, and as you mentioned, a massive night for St Pat's as well last night. How did they get on?
Well, brilliant. Like the irony is when the Rovers go away, Pats are playing in Tallaght Stadium, so obviously to facilitate European football. But absolutely superb performances because, again, they were underdogs going into this game. And just full credit to Stephen Kenny and what he's done, because obviously he didn't have luck in the Irish job, but he's gone into Pats. It took a while to get going with league form, but he's sort of built his philosophy and his big performances on European football. And yeah, it's quite exciting. So Pats are 0-0 after the first leg, and they'll go into the second leg definitely with a shot at trying to reach European group stage football, which would be superb. And then they'd end up being the 6th side ever from League of Ireland. So we are witnessing potential history here, but it's a big week next week for Pats. But yeah, word on them, as I said, they've just been absolutely superb on this European run. And we've seen that sometimes with League of Ireland sides, if they're not doing too well in the league, they can really put all their eggs in the European basket. Kenny was giving out that they do have to play this weekend at Dundalk, so that's going to be tough for them to sort of manage European football and the league as well.
Yeah, he was complaining to the FAI for refusing to postpone Premier Division games between European legs. Does he have a point there, do you think?
100%. I think like come group stage is fine, but this is so critical, these qualifying rounds, for not just Irish sides, but people involved, because we all know the way this country works. It's predominantly Premier League based and Premier League supported. So to have these games, 8 guaranteed group stage games, is too big an opportunity. And now not every league does it in Europe, but the smaller leagues definitely should say, look, let's, especially with Pats that aren't really involved in any sort of serious in terms of top or bottom of the table. And one frustration is the sort of TV coverage of these games. It was unfortunate that free-to-air coverage wasn't able to be provided. These games would have to be paid €10, which is great for fans, but also fans of the actual club that they get to watch the games. But it's the bandwagon support that I've just touched on. They don't get to watch it. I think Premier Sport have the rights to Europa and Conference League group stages, which is great. They'll be able to show the games, but it's unfortunate these games weren't seen last night as well, you know.
Well, a busy night of football at home, but also across the pond there was action. Chelsea taking on the Swiss side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Chelsea have, like, for those who don't know, like 42 players when more normal teams have 20 players. And even looking at the lineup last night before the game and saying, okay, I know most of them, which is good, but it's hard to keep up with them. And people would be surprised in general. They're in the Conference League, but obviously one Premier League team does. So. And
that game, 2-0 last night was 2-0. So a good night for Chelsea.
Yeah, solid performance. Solid result. The performance wasn't great. Like there's a number of chances they gave away, but overall, I think they'll just be Maresca would be happy just to get the win. But for him, it's just a case of getting them into the group stage. But the Chelsea story is going to go on and on, because I think like they have something like 190 years worth of players' contracts, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The next closest Premier League team is like half that. So it shows what Todd Bowley's trying to do is this baseball style, put everyone under 8, 9, 10-year contracts with slightly less wages, but they get the long-term longevity.
Yeah, now, I'd take a contract like that.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone's like, everyone's like, what type of player wants to go to Chelsea? Someone that's looking after their long-term future, I guess. But if you're going to be ambitious with your career, people do look at players that go to Chelsea. I'll give you an example. Conor Gallagher left to go to Atletico Madrid. He's been at Chelsea since a kid. He's went on loan, did all that stuff, managed to break into the first team, and they sold him Atletico. So João Felix, who doesn't even fit into what Chelsea are trying to do, comes the other way. So I feel it's ultimately going to end in tears for them, and it's just probably not the way you go about things as well. So I think a lot of people outside Chelsea sort of want to see this thing fail. Obviously, Chelsea fans want to see it do well. Time obviously reveals all, but yeah. Look, they were expected to win last night, but I wouldn't say it was an amazing performance. But they got it done.
And then very quickly, the Women's British Open. So Lauren Walsh joins Leona Maguire, Stephanie Meadow. How are they getting on? Yeah,
so Stephanie was disappointing that she got 5 over. Walsh was 3 over. And then Leona was solid enough with 1 over par. So the lead is -5 at the moment with Charlie Hull. But look, with Leona, this sort of course, these sort of conditions, windy at St Andrews, the home of golf, gives her a sort of shot and maybe getting a bit of form. I think she's had 3 missed cuts in the last 4 majors. So she'll be disappointed with a year, given how well when she first broke onto the scene, really with Solheim Cup performances a couple of times and match play performances. Obviously, the Olympics, there was context with their having the flu and I think probably COVID there in the end. But yeah, disappointing for Leona this season, but a solid enough start. But look at the leaderboard for those who watch women's golf, like Charlie Hull, it's a brilliant leaderboard, stacked at the moment, and Nelly Korda, who's the world #1, the women's equivalent to Scotty Scheffler this year. She's only 1 back as well, so I think it's going to be a great weekend. If Leona could stick there.
Do you think the course will suit Leona as well? Well, I mean, she'll probably want to draw it back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like you said, the course will suit, the windy conditions, that's where Leona's always been at her best. I always sort of... She reminds me of Shane Larry again in the men's term, but for those that don't tune in now and again, she's the wind really should suit for her. So, but as I said, stacked leaderboard, so I expect obviously the likes of probably Nelly Korda will win it, but yeah, it'll be a good weekend.
Daniel Hussey, thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries.
Coming up, staying safe on Leaving Cert Results night. We'll have advice on keeping your wits about you while celebrating. Stay with us.
Very welcome back to Ireland AM. It's Leaving Cert Results night tonight, and many young people will be planning on heading out to celebrate their hard work.
Here with advice on how to do this safely for both students and parents is HSE Adolescent Addiction Psychiatrist Professor Bobby Smith. Good morning, Bobby.
Good morning.
Great to see you. So, look, for some, tonight will revolve around drinking, will involve drinking. What are some tips that parents, or what are some things that parents should discuss with their children before the children head out tonight?
I suppose the first thing we're really suggesting to parents is that they do plan to actually have a discussion, not just be a passive spectator on the evening. Try and talk through with your son or daughter what the plans are for the night, where they're going, who they're going out with, how they're going to get there, how they're going to get home. Is alcohol going to be part of the plan? What are their thoughts around that? Parents will know, you'll know your son or daughter, I guess, at this stage. They'll probably have had nights out before. Most kids getting Leaving Cert Results now are 18, some of them will be 19. They've been, parents will have observed what's worked well in the past and what nights haven't worked out so well. So you're just trying to use your observation and experience to try and help your son or daughter think through the evening to make sure as many come home safely and with positive stories of the night that they can actually remember and talk about for when they're talking to their own kids.
When you think of nights like tonight, and it's becoming increasingly more popular, the notion of pre-drinking before you go out, and when usually that involves taking spirits, and it's not just a couple of beers. Increasingly, that's because of the cost of going out, etc. That's what tends to happen, particularly with younger people. So that's quite dangerous.
Yeah, I suppose it's definitely harder to manage what you're consuming, and a core piece of advice, I suppose, generally for anyone of any age when they're going out drinking is to try to have some sort of plan as to how much you're going to drink or where you're going to put the limit at. And that's clearly harder to do in a pre-drink situation, particularly where you're not the one pouring the drink, and particularly where people are drinking spirits as opposed to beer or cider, where you can sort of get some sense of how many cans or bottles you've had. So once again, it's about thinking that through, trying to figure out if you are drinking spirits in that sort of a situation. If you've been out before, you'll have some sense of what you can take and not take, and try to keep it at that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because at this age, they probably don't have that much experience with drinking. They don't know their tolerance. They don't know what they can or can't drink. This is an issue that I had my Leaving Cert Results night. I just didn't know my limits. So how can they go about it with ensuring that they don't go past a limit that they may have?
So at the start, it's about trying to be mindful of the fact that they do need to keep an eye on this, that they really are trying to pace it, that at the start they are having a minimum amount of alcohol and as much mixer, I guess, as possible, that they're not getting swept away by the excitement in the room and drinks being passed around, that they keep control of it themselves. Ideally, just, it takes a while for alcohol after you consume it to have its impact. Maybe have a soft drink in between your alcoholic drinks to get a better sense of where you're at, because once you begin to realise, oh, I'm going a bit, I'm not feeling so good anymore, there's still a lot of alcohol probably in your stomach if you've been just drinking away steadily, and it's sort of too late for you to realise that fact.
And it's easy to get swept away, in fairness, in a night like this. Leaving Cert Results tonight, I know we're calling them children, but the vast majority of students who would be getting their results now will be 18, they will be adults, they're legally able to make their own decisions, so there's only so much policing parents can do in that instance. But in nights like that, in circumstances like that, whatever about pre-drinking and drinking when you go out, there's a lot more out there than just alcohol now, unfortunately. It's becoming increasingly prevalent. Before, maybe drugs were limited to cities, and maybe their first taste might be in college, but in every little village and town, drugs are rife now. So not only do you have the problem with alcohol and the inhibitions that get closed down with the consumption of alcohol, you've got the temptation of drugs as well and the peer pressure that comes with that. Talk to us about that and how difficult that can be. Yeah,
there's definitely increased availability of a broader range of drugs now in 2024 than there was in 2004 or 1984. And I think that probably should be part of the conversation as well. It's a bit about who'll be out, will there be drugs in the room, do they think, and parents trying to have this conversation as well, or there's bound to be some people in the class, it'll be hard to get kids talking about their own drug use, but it may be possible to have a more general conversation. There'll probably be some people there using drugs. Do you ever encounter drugs? What do you think of that? Where once again you're trying to have a conversation, and that's the challenge in this, I suppose. Where
without
you're
being too judgy,
you're trying to help them think through the pros and cons, because most kids are aware of risks related to drug use, and they might have their own reasons why they've decided that's not for them, in which case it's no harm for you to hear what those reasons might be and to amplify them and to applaud them for choosing to step out of that world if that's been their decision.
And then is it important for parents to really, they're not their friend in this moment. They need to kind of explain their concerns and not bury their head in their sand and take a stance on it.
Yeah, I think it's entirely appropriate for parents to make it clear what their expectations are. With regard to drug use, should we make it clear that you don't have permission to use drugs, and the explanation as to why, which is down to all the risks, the risks of addiction, the risks of mental health impacts, the risks of ending up in the emergency department. But also making it clear that no matter what happens on the night, if something goes badly wrong, get on the phone, call for help. Yes. You'll be there. And equally, if one of their mates gets into major difficulty, don't be slow to seek adult assistance. Don't be slow if you need to call an ambulance or get some medical attention. Which is it's scary to say things like this, but they do need to be said when it comes to nights like these, because these things do happen. And I suppose a vulnerable cohort as well this evening might be people who are disappointed with their results, and we have a hugely negative drinking culture here in Ireland, the whole thing of drowning your sorrows, and that will be happening for an awful lot of Leaving Cert students tonight as well, and that in itself can be quite dangerous. Yeah, I'm mindful of the diversity of teenagers that are out there. You had a contributor earlier on talking about just not being used to social situations and being uncomfortable in the night out setting, and there's others who'll be there upset and disappointed. And that culture of drowning sorrows is a worrying one. And it's perhaps a situation where someone is maybe more likely, if they haven't thought it through in advance, to just drink more than they would normally. So once again, as a parent, it's about helping them think through, if they are disappointed, does it maybe make sense to modify the plan a little bit? It's all about the plan, really, isn't it? And that's what you're kind of stressing tonight, that there needs to be a plan in place for parents and their students to talk about before they actually go out. That's basically it.
Yeah.
We often hear about children replicating the behaviour that they see in their parents. Is there anything that parents can do to ensure that their children, I don't know, have a healthy approach or relationship with substances?
Yeah, well, given, Leaving Cert night is tonight, so it's going to be a bit late in the day to try and change that for tonight.
Closing the barn door after the horse is bolted, literally, at this stage,
no, it's a really good point, that the more parents drink, the more their kids tend to drink. So as parents, it's important to be mindful about our own drinking in a general sense, particularly where we've got teenagers or younger children. Don't model using alcohol as how you manage stress. Don't model using alcohol as your only method of marking celebration and pleasant occasions. When you do use alcohol, try not to move into a space where you're becoming sort of drunk or incoherent or intoxicated, where you're modelling, again, low-risk use of alcohol.
Professor Bobby Smith, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
For more information on what we discussed today, check out askaboutalcohol.ie.
And for confidential information and support about alcohol, contact the free HSE Drugs and Alcohol helpline at free phone 1800 459 459 from Monday to Friday, or mail helpline at HSE anytime.
Still to come, the perfect sweet treat for school lunchboxes next week.
Plus, Star Trek's Robert Picardo will be stopping by. I can't believe it, I'm so excited. Anyway, stay with us, we're live till 10. It's a mixed bag across the morning's papers. We'll start with the Irish Times, which leads with majority of Leaving Cert grades artificially inflated. The paper reports that most of this year's Leaving Cert student grades have been artificially inflated by exam authorities to bring them into line with record highs of recent years.
The Irish Independent leads with Senior Gardai faced down McEntee in row over top job. The paper reports that Senior Gardai have sought to face down Justice Minister Helen McEntee in a row over pension rules that has caused chaos in filling the role of Deputy Commissioner.
We are forgotten about. We have no one to turn to, is the lead in the Irish Examiner. It's reporting that parents and students of St Killian's Special School have demanded the government restore therapeutic services to their Cork school.
On to the tabloids now, and the Daily Mail leads with move on land tax needed to save budget. The paper reports that the race is on to solve the crisis in the coalition over the controversial shelving of the land hoarding tax, which could jeopardise the giveaway budget. The paper also carries a photograph of Match of the Day and the One Show presenter Jermaine Genus, who has been sacked by the BBC over inappropriate texts to a colleague.
Revealed, that's the front page of the Irish Daily Mirror. The paper reports that triple killer Samir Said took his own life just hours after he was told he was fit to stand trial for the murder of his wife and children.
The Sun leads with It's Showtime, reporting that broadcaster Gráinne Seoige has bagged enough nominations from Fianna Fáil members to be a party candidate at the next general election.
Knock Enoch, who's there, is the lead in the Irish Daily Star. It's reporting that Enoch Burke has returned to a secondary school in Westmeath despite losing a High Court action aimed at setting aside an order for him to stay away.
And finally, the Herald leads with 7-man gang of burglars hit Dublin home. The paper carries a story of a Dublin family who have told how a gang of 7 masked intruders tried to burgle their home yesterday. Now, last night, myself and Elaine were painting the town red, attending the launch of Virgin Media Play, our brand new streaming service. And we used the opportunity to unveil all the fresh content for you to enjoy with us here on Virgin Media Television over the coming months. It was
I wouldn't say red, it was a pale pink, because we were
You're
up early.
fresh.
Well,
we were up early.
We were home by 2 of us were home by 8. We were very.
I was home in my jammies at 7:30.
There you go.
Yeah.
We were very
that's
sensible.
an absolute lie.
Gone
now.
are the days that we used to be able to.
Well, we were in here
late.
very early this
Very,
morning. That
very
was the
early.
only thing that held us back, though.
Yeah.
You know?
In fairness, see those cocktails there? Did we have one?
I had a mocktail.
No. I had water.
It was delicious. There
What
she
were the
is.
highs and lows, girls? What is really exciting you for this new season?
That's coming up this season.
Real Life with Lucy, I'd say, is going to be brilliant.
Yes, Real Life with Lucy. So she's having a look at life for young people. Oh, there I am. There. Look at
George.
she's
Who are
looking
you
at-
talking about?
Yeah, I know. What am I using all my fingers for? So she's going to be having a look at life for young people in Ireland. An unfiltered look at what's... Oh, there's no... Look at you. So I'm getting so distracted by this, I can't even talk about the show. With
We
Lucy
all
Kennedy.
have lovely bottoms. We're
We do,
fabulous.
yeah. So she'll be taking an
Oh, the
unfiltered look
Olympians
at
were
life.
there.
Thomas Barr, yes.
Sarah Lavin, a good Limerick woman.
Yes.
Talking to a goggle boxer, another Limerick man.
Yeah, I was a bit now
Delighted, actually,
starstruck
goggle boxers.
meeting the goggle boxers, the two
Yeah.
boys and their mammy.
Yeah.
Love them.
What's the story with-
Anita as well, I met Anita. She only lives up the road from me.
Really?
Yeah, great old chats with them.
So what else is coming? We have Life Actually, which follows 8 couples over a full year as they navigate the reality of babies, mortgages, marriages, and so much more. So anyone in that time of their life can follow it.
I like the sound of the Virgin Media original drama Dead and Buried.
Yeah, I know. I love a bit of
Sounds
drama.
good.
It's filmed in Ireland. It's coming to Virgin Media 1 on the 2nd of September. That'll be good.
Women Locked Up inside the Docus Centre. That's going to be brilliant. It's a docu-series
I
as well.
think so.
And it's all available on the new player, which is really handy. New
I feel
look,
we'll get-
fabulousness.
That's it.
Yeah.
We might get a dribble Elaine if we don't mention Graw and Troll.
Yous will.
Was Graw found there on Troll?
Graw, I don't know about the longevity of the Graw, but there was certainly some type of Graw Aaron Traw. Yes, we'll be back from mid-October with the new season.
And you can get it on the new and improved free Virgin Media app, which will be available on the 2nd of September if you want to see Síomha running around a beach with James Kavanagh. Off you go.
I
That's
won't
what
be
you
in a
do.
bikini though. Can't make any promises, all right?
Oh, I don't know about that. Well, up next, funny man Eric Lalor is in the building. He joins us right after this break.
This week on Ireland AM, we've teamed up with Breast Cancer Ireland to give away a his and hers Fitbit and entry to the Very Pink Run every day this week. The 2024 Very Pink Run is back again with an option for participants to take part in either one or all three of our physical Very Pink Run live events. Being held in Dublin on the 31st of August, Kilkenny on the 1st of September, or Cork on the 8th of September. You can run, jog, or stroll, something for everyone. Every fun-filled step taken as a part of the Very Pink Run is a step closer to saving lives. A fun-filled experience for you and a powerful act for those affected by breast cancer. For more information, visit verypinkrun.ie. For your chance to win, just answer this question. How many colours are in the rainbow? A, 2, B, 7. To enter, call 1550 999 333 or text WIN to 57199. Best of luck.
Very welcome back. Our next guest has gone from the villain we love to hate on Fair City to a beloved comedy podcaster.
And he joins us to tell us all about his latest projects. Actor and comedian Eric Lalor is here in the studio. But before we meet him, let's have a look at some of the jokes he's known for.
Mr. Connecticut, have you been anywhere else apart from Cork in Ireland?
Yes.
You have been? Have you been to Dublin?
Yes.
Yeah? Just the city, was it?
Trying to remember.
Ah, listen, it's grand.
County Mayo.
County Mayo, yeah, that's in Dublin, yeah.
Great
Wow,
to see. Yeah.
brilliant crowd work there.
Your finest work, Eric, your finest work.
Great to see you this morning, Eric. You have had a busy summer between gigs in Boston and an appearance at EP. Has it been mental?
It's been non-stop, but do you know what? It's great being busy, you know, because, I mean, we had that 2.5-year period where we didn't really do much.
Yep.
So it's great to be busy again and doing things that I love. I was just talking to you before we went live there how much of a slog Electric Picnic was, but it was great. You have to do it.
Ah, it is, yeah.
A slog, the two of you, everyone who's been there is still banjoed after it.
We're still recovering.
And you're blaming the walking. The walking was the issue.
Walking, that's all it was, yeah.
How many steps did you do?
48,000 steps from midnight Saturday night to midnight Sunday night. That's 20 miles, Elaine. 20 miles.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And I'm one of these people who likes to go to the gym every day. I don't have to go to the gym for the next 2 weeks now because of that. Because of that one day.
But you do need stamina, whatever about for walking around Electric Picnic. I mean, gigging every night, especially in his comedy, it does takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, and I'm having one of those weeks at the moment where I have a gig every night this week since Tuesday, and I'm gigging every night now till Saturday night with a couple of double ups. So yeah, you do need your strength and stamina. So I'm glad I'm in decent condition and fit. You know,
It's a bit of God.
Yeah.
Do people still recognise you from your time in Fair City, Eric, or is it from your podcast that people know you from mostly?
It's crazy. Like, the podcast has only been going a few months, but you know, I do get recognised a lot from Fair City. Like, even down at Electric Picnic, it was crazy. I was watching Ray on the main stage, and I mean, there was a group of women who just stopped, and my mate went, "There's a group of women kind of just standing behind looking at you," and I turned around and they went, "Hi, are you from like Instagram or something?" And I went, "Isn't everyone?"
Yeah.
And they went, "No, like, are you like kind of famous?" And I went, "It depends what you call famous." And then they just went, "Are you your man from Fair City?" I said, "Yeah, I am, yeah." And they're like, "Oh my God," they got photographs. But there was loads of people doing that. But a lot of people now are starting to go, "Are you your man from the podcast?" Which is brilliant, you know?
Yes,
because
the pivot.
Yeah, a lot of the cut downs from the podcast go out on the socials and TikTok and Instagram, so it's in everyone's feed.
But you've quite an eclectic mixed bag as a career at the moment, because in fairness, whatever with Fair City and the podcast, you've gigged in some strange places. The Joy being one of them.
Yes.
Tell me all about that and why it excited you so much.
I brought joy to the members of the Joy.
There you go.
Well, no, it's a thing I've done a few times over the years. I've gone into Mountjoy Prison and I've done gigs for the prisoners who are being prepared for release. So they're in the training unit. And the first time I did it, I was a little bit intimidated, you know. I felt like I was Johnny Cash going in to do Folsom Prison Blues. I was like, oh, is there going to be chicken wire in front of me to protect me?
Kind of method acting for Cathal.
yeah. Which is the thing as well. When I went into the prison, the prisoners see it coming in and they saw me. They're all going, oh, here he is, Collins Bolan, one of our own.
They were hiding from you, were they?
I'm only acting. But, you know, it's great. You have a captive audience. But there you go. No,
That's why you're paid the big bucks.
That's why I'm getting all the festivals. But, you know, it was obviously nerve-wracking doing it. But, you know, you got to think those guys, they don't get to do much every day. You know, they watch a bit of television, they do whatever arts and crafts is available.
Yes.
And for someone to come in and do comedy and entertain them, they're so grateful. Yeah. So they were all coming up to me afterwards, shaking my hand and all that. When I saw them walking up first, I was like, oh, and they were like, oh, brilliant show, thanks very much. I was going, all right, no worries. But yeah, it was quite a liberating thing to do.
But you were also in there with the late great Christy Taken, of course. What was that like?
It was amazing. Like, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to meet Christy over the years, doing various gigs and being at his gigs. And yeah, there was one particular gig where we did a gig for the guys in the training unit, and Christy went up and did a few songs on his guitar, and amazing as ever. And then he sat in the front row with the prisoners as I went on stage, and I did half an hour, and I was looking down at him and he was laughing away. And then he came up to me afterwards and he said, I don't know how you do what you do. He says, at least with me, I've got a guitar, I can hide behind the guitar, I can hide behind the microphone, but with you, there's nowhere to run. You know what I mean? There's nowhere to hide. It's just like me or hate me. But you pulled it off, fair play to you. So that a ringing endorsement from a legend.
Absolutely, high praise.
Yeah.
Now, am I right in thinking that you once almost got shot when you were doing stand-up? Sorry, no, this is a bit mad segue. I'm thinking
a bit of a stretch,
prison gigs to actual some crime that was almost committed upon you.
I know if anyone has never seen me, is just looking at this interview going, my God, that guy lives on the edge. Well, I did a show a few years ago for Carlow IT, and they have a splinter group in Carlow, or in Wexford, right? So
splinter group.
Splinter group, I know. Dodgy. Yeah, this sounds dodgy as well. And it was Rag Week, you know, Rag Week for the. And so they booked me to do an hour in some pub, and the gig was an early afternoon. I think it was at 2:00. But the pubs, as you know, open at about 10:30. When we got to the venue, there had already been a younger guy and an older guy in the bar, knocking the drinks back from 10:30 in the morning. And they were looking at the gig being set up around them, going, what's going on here, kind of thing, like, you know. And then the students all came in, the place was packed, and I got up and I started doing my comedy. And the boys were starting to enjoy it as well, and they were roaring stuff up at me. And I was giving it back to them. And then they started, you know, I don't think they were expecting me to respond to them. I think they thought they were watching the television, you know. And they got quite leery, I suppose, you know. And one of them went to the bar. It was a father and son, it turned out to be, and they were farmers. One of them went to the bathroom, and he came back from the bathroom, but he had a bit of toilet roll attached to his foot. And I just said, look, you've got a bit of toilet roll. And he says, what do you mean by that? I said, I don't mean anything by that. I mean, you've got a bit of toilet roll.
A massive insult from Wexford.
Yeah. How dare you? How dare you? And then the bouncers went, those lads are ruining the gig now, like, you know. So they came down and just escorted them off. But as he was going out the door, he turned around to me, he says, I'll be back in a few minutes with me shotgun, and then we'll see who's funny. And I was like, oh my God. And I was trying to get all the information off the locals, going, do you know how far away they live? Like, I've got 20 minutes left in this gig. Like, will they get back in here in 20 minutes? So I sped up the gig, finished in 5 minutes, jumped in the car and drove off home. So
they
there we go.
Back. Did you ever find out if they came back looking for you?
No, I didn't. Yeah. But I've never been to Wexford since.
I couldn't believe it. I believe it. The sunny southeast can stay there. So tell us about your stand-up gig, Lalor by Nature. I love the name, by the way. It's coming to Liberty Hall this September. What can people expect from that?
September 19th, Síomha. It's my biggest solo show to date. You know, I've done a couple of solo shows over the years, and they've been, like, I think the Sugar Club was the biggest one I did in Dublin. I probably should have done a big one by now at this stage, but I've been inspired by my co-host of the podcast, Will White, who is, at the moment, bigger than Taylor Swift. He's selling out everywhere, like, you know.
He'd be delighted with that.
And he's the image of her. And he's flying.
Flowing lock.
Yeah, he's flying, he is. And so he just said, man, if I can do it, you can do it. So MCD, we had a chat, and he said, look, we're going to stick it on. Ticket sales are going okay, but I'm hoping performances like this on this morning show will speed up more ticket sales, you know. But MCD is showing me, going, look, Eric, there's always a big last-minute rush, 2 weeks to go kind of thing. We're still 4 weeks away. It's what can they expect? Well, they can expect a man on stage pleading for validation from the crowd as usual in the guise of jokes.
Granddad jokes?
Granddad jokes, yes, Elaine.
Oh my God, I'm watching your social media. You're such a proud granddad. It's
I
not
love
even
him so
funny. Tell us all about that.
Teddy is my...
Gorgeous.
He's my biggest fan. And I know he'll be watching the telly right now. And that's what he does. When I'm on like the 6 o'clock show or I'm on shows like this, my daughter Jodie gets him to watch the television.
Look at him.
There he is. That's him watching me on the 6 o'clock show. And he's like, what's Grandad doing?
He lives in the same box as SpongeBob.
And look, there he is trying to kiss me on the television. Look.
That's adorable.
Yeah, he's my biggest fan, and he thinks I'm hilarious. So I'm going to have him front and centre at the Liberty Hall show.
Perfect.
There'll be somebody laughing, you know.
But do you know what? Many people might know this, but I do because I know you donkey's ears. You weren't always a comedian.
No.
What were you? Wait till you hear this. What were you before you were a comedian?
I used to work in IBM. I was a software salesman, basically, yeah.
Isn't that gas?
Yeah.
You had a proper job.
Yeah, a proper job with a pension, with a health plan. And my wife is watching this going, yeah, like bloody no. We had it so good back then.
Followed your dream.
Yeah, yeah. I even won an IBM Global Salesforce Award one year, you know.
But we're only in this planet for a short time. You have to do what you love.
Exactly. I'm sure my wife's at home nodding in agreement going, yeah, he's right, he only has one life. He's lucky he still has it, basically.
Eric, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us today.
Thanks
Best of luck with your gig.
Thank you so much.
And listen, I'm sure it'll fly. And if you have Teddy front and centre, we'll all be there looking at. He's so adorable. Of course, you can find tickets for Eric's stand-up gig, Lalor by Nature, on ticketmaster.ie.
After the break, a treat to include in the school lunchboxes next week. We're up in the kitchen in just a few minutes.
Futarash. Now, schools begin to open again from next week, which means we're back packing lunchboxes every day. Shiva, you love a good lunchbox.
I do. Are you packing some lunchboxes for next week?
Absolutely not, no. I'm a on-the-go gal.
Daniel Lambert joins us with a quick option for a treat to sit side by side with your trusty Sambos. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning. How are we?
Oh,
good.
Great.
You're making us a sweet treat, which we will admit we've already been nibbling on this morning.
I sure am. It's a back-to-school treat. It's one of my favourites I had when I was a child. So they're cornflake lunchbox bars. So we're here today with Costco and we're going to make them.
Okay. You can't go wrong with the cereal in general. Do you know what? I always forget how delicious a bowl of cereal is. I don't buy it normally, but when I do, I'm like, oh, it's a great ingredient, isn't it?
It's so simple and so easy. So you can see how much golden syrup
a lot.
in here.
Oh, wow. Is it the whole bottle, Daniel?
Well, I'm going to make a big batch here now for everybody, but usually you'd use about 300 grams of each. It's equal amounts of syrup to peanut butter. Now, look, I like to make it a little bit healthy.
So a little bit healthy.
I put peanut butter instead of butter.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So we have our peanut butter coming in here now.
Yes, okay.
So just equal amounts of each, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to melt that down, and then you're going to weigh out 150 grams of cornflakes.
Can I just ask what kind of heat you'd have that on, Daniel?
A very low one.
Okay.
Kind of a low to medium. You put it up too high, what happens is the sugar starts to caramelise in the golden syrup. And what happens then is it starts to burn. So you want to keep it on kind of a nice low heat.
Okay. Can I ask why you chose cornflakes? Because if I was to go and make something sweet out of cereal, I'd always go for Rice Krispies. It's just my natural...
I think it's just two camps of life, isn't it?
Jeez.
To be honest, I haven't had a bowl of cornflakes in about 10 years.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what, I'll just go ahead and I'll make them. They're kind of, I think they're a bit more crunchier.
Yeah, they're a bit more mileage in the cornflake.
And there's more surface area to them, so they carry...
We're getting into the technicality
of the cornforflake. Well, listen.
We're going to be experts on cereal now at the end of the show. But no, when I was a child, my nan used to always make these for me. And to be honest, she used to buy them in the shop.
Oh.
Yeah.
I used to make them, and it's bringing me back to my school days.
Aww.
And it's such a simple snack to do. So what I have in there is equal amounts of each, 150 grams of cornflakes. And what I've done is I've melted down some milk and chocolate.
Delish.
Just in the bottle. So what you can do is you can just actually crack them up into little pieces, put them into some plastic bottles, into your boiling water, and they'll melt down. And you can do your decorations on top. It's so simple.
Can I ask if you had a person who was either allergic to peanuts or didn't like peanuts, what would be your replacement?
Butter.
Just regular butter?
Regular butter, yeah.
Okay. So these are going to be unhealthy, whatever.
We're trying to be healthy. Now, look, if you don't want to use cornflakes, what you can do is you can actually put porridge in here, raisins.
Oh, very good.
Some fruits, some dried fruits, apricots, if you're looking to kind of balance out the diet.
But this is the kind of snack you need when you're over the lunchtime slump. You need something to pick you up for the rest of the afternoon. Bit of sugar, this will keep you going.
This is it. And they look great in lunchboxes. Well, that one's a bit overfull there now.
They do.
So this is how it goes, right?
Can we actually take a bite of these, Daniel?
Go ahead.
We're going to pretend we haven't already.
Like we haven't been doing it all morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they were tempting me there.
Delicious.
Oh, here we go.
I like the way they're kind of gooey.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I like the texture in them like that. It's just, again, it's nostalgia. Like, it brings you back to the days of making them. So look, that's how easy it is to make them there.
And how long would these keep? If you were making a big batch at the start of the week, would you get the week out of them?
Oh, you would, yeah. You get the week out of them. You keep them in the fridge. If you leave them out of the fridge for too long, like you really want to be eating them within 4 or 5 hours. Don't leave them out the whole day. Keep them in there, So that's it there. So look, if you're stuck to make something for the lunchbox for a treat for a Friday, I've done that there now in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is...
Do you know what I was always very guilty of doing with the lunchbox? If I had a sandwich, a piece of fruit, and one of these bars now, I wouldn't be able to save the treat till the end. I'd go straight in on the small break.
Straight into the treat.
For the sweet, yeah. But I'd say you were good. You were probably the opposite, were you? No.
So that's pretty much your tray bake there done. So what you do then is you decorate it with some white chocolate.
Ooh, that's a fun part.
Yeah. So look, it's actually kind of fun as well. You can get the kids involved at the house,
You can even get Louise Canton involved.
But you know what? This is kind of like cooking for dummies. Can I say that politely?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it is.
It doesn't take a lot of brain power to do that. It's quick and simple.
Easy. Everybody's busy,
Yeah.
So it's very simple. And I think this is the part where I say, here's one I preferred earlier.
Lovely. We like that step.
Yeah, you need to let that sit in the fridge for about, an hour or two. And then what you do is you portion it up then.
Yeah.
So I just use a normal kind of a tray bake tin here.
Oh, fabulous.
You can see that's one massive cornflake bar.
Delicious. That's my one now. And I suppose the thing is, like, for kiddies, when you're sending them off, you don't want to send them with too much sugar in their lunchbox, but you could just give them a little square every day.
A little square, that's all it is. We used to be only allowed treats on a Friday.
Oh, really?
See, and I think a lot of schools are becoming more and more strict when it comes to what you're allowed to pack.
Okay.
So does this... you could probably also not put chocolate on this if you weren't allowed chocolate.
You can put raisins on it.
You put raisins and fruit, yeah.
You can literally substitute the cornflakes for a more healthier option as well, But that's pretty much them there.
They're absolutely delicious.
There we go.
I just want to keep eating them, and I probably will keep eating them.
Look how many you get, though, and probably actually very much a cheap treat.
It's very, very cost efficient.
Yes.
All the ingredients today I got in cost cutter, so they're very easily got.
Okay.
Easy peasy, beautiful. So good, so sweet.
You can check out the full recipe online as well if you want to.
Yes.
But what is it, a three ingredient recipe?
3 ingredients.
And 3 minutes.
And 3 minutes, there you go. Easy as that.
That's it.
Daniel, thank you so much for making them for us today.
Yeah, delicious.
Full recipe details are up on our website. Check it out on virginmediatelevision.ie/IrelandIM.
And the day has finally arrived. This morning is the morning that thousands of students across the country will be receiving their Leaving Cert results. We'll be chatting about everything you need to know next. Fáilte Rash. Now, in just over an hour's time, almost 61,000 students around the country will be receiving their Leaving Cert results.
Now, whether you do or don't get your course, you'll be wondering what are the next steps. Well, Guidance Counsellor Betty McLaughlin joins us now to answer all your burning questions. Good morning, Betty. Thank you for joining us.
Elaine.
And really, when it comes to the burning questions, a lot of people will be, did I get enough points for the course I want? And we don't know because, and once again, we have an inflated grade situation going on.
We have that, and we have the agonising wait until next Wednesday before the courses offers come out. So the best they can do this morning is just log in to the candidate self-service portal, and for that they'll need their Leaving Cert exam number, their PIN number for the portal and their PPS number. And once they put in those 3 pieces of information, their results will be waiting there for them.
You've got a bit of inside information. Is it a record breaker this year?
I don't think so. They say it's not. The State Exams Commission has said it's going to be very much in line with the last 3 years.
Okay.
And that's because of the adjustment that's put in after the correction in order to not see the students this year disadvantaged by the COVID and the predicted grades and so on. So we still have that legacy hanging over us.
Yeah, that hangover, as you mentioned, Elaine, the grade inflation. Is there any trends already? I know we're obviously going to know more when the results come out officially, but are we seeing any trends?
We're not seeing any trends. There were no major trends last year. It has been reported that they're very much in line with last year. So I'm not expecting any surprises this year, really, taking the adjustment into account and so on.
Of course, there'll be overwhelming demand when the portal opens. Are there any websites, etc., the parents can access if they're having difficulties or students can access?
Well, the best thing to do if you're having difficulty, you can contact the National Parents Council line, so parents can ring, students can ring. It's a free phone number, 1-800-265-165, so they can ring there, and there will be guidance counsellors manned by manning the lines from the Institute of Guidance Counsellors, and they will give them all the direction that they need. Now, it was a very robust system last year. There were no difficulties, so we hope that the same will happen this year for the students.
And I know for a lot of students, they'll log on this morning and there'll be mixed emotions. Some will be elated, some will be disappointed. And I think what sometimes we forget is that there's many rounds to the CAO. So what might disappoint you today might necessarily actually work in your favour in a few weeks' time.
Yes, and there are extra courses put in, extra places put in on different courses, particularly healthcare courses this year. So the points may come down and there may be less points needed than what was needed last year. So it's a waiting game until 10 o'clock or until 2 p.m. actually next Wednesday, the 28th of August.
And it's a round situation as well, isn't it, when the CAO
yes, there is.
So explain that to us.
So round one will be offered, and students are given 6 days to accept that. And if they don't accept that course online, it's just a box ticking exercise. If they don't do that, they could forfeit their course. So they have to decide if they want it. They need to accept it. Now, in saying that then, there's round two. So if students forfeit their course, and that leaves more places available, so that means there will be a second round of offers where the points might drop in certain courses, And that course system, that round system goes on until mid-October. Also, students who are looking for a recheck, who might get an upgrade in their results, if, by accepting the course that they're offered now, still keeps them in the running right up to the end for a higher order preference course on their application form.
So explain that, So if you do accept maybe your third choice, and that's what you get, if you're offered your first choice further down the road, you can still take that.
You can. You're absolutely not penalised. You're still in the competition right to the end for courses that are higher up on your order of merit list.
Yeah, it's really about keeping your options open. So would you say it is, like, if there is a small margin and you're only a few points out, is it worth getting exam papers rechecked?
It is worth, first and foremost, it is worth viewing the script.
Yeah.
Because that will show you where your marks, what you got in each component of that exam. You can see the actual marked script. If it was corrected online, you can access it online. If not, you can get the manual copy in your school. You just have to apply to your school to come in and view it. Now, I would say view the script first, because then you will be more informed as to whether it is worth getting an appeal or not. Now, while it rarely happens, students can be downgraded in the appeal.
Yeah.
So you want to be sure, it really does merit a recorrection, putting yourself through that whole reassessment system again, But if you have to pay €40 per subject for recheck, but if you're successful, you will get your €40 back on top of getting your grade.
Should you view the paper with your teacher or bring in an external or another opinion?
Yeah, it's usual that teachers would look at if the student requests for a teacher to view the script, they will do that with them. You're allowed to bring one person in with you.
Yeah.
And of course, if it's up online, it's very easy for anybody to, view it with you.
Talk to me about maths. If you fail your maths, do you have to resit it in order to pass your leaving?
No, you do not, Elaine. That's an absolute myth. And there are many courses that don't require maths at all. I mean, you could fail your maths and still, if you have applied for law, and still get a place on law. Arts degrees do not require maths unless you're going to want to study maths, which is unlikely anyway if you fail them, that you would want to continue with them. But that is not true. There are many courses there and you do not require maths for those courses. So it's no longer needed for matriculation. Of course, there are lots of courses that will require it, but certainly if it's not mathematical, there's a good chance you'll get your offer.
And check the minimum requirements on your courses, because a lot of people don't read that fine print and get stung badly, hence me bawling crying the entire day. Am I leaving cert?
Absolutely.
But it's high pressure and high stakes, and I think what a lot of students tend to forget as well is, if the CAO doesn't go their way, there's horses for courses. There's so many alternative pathways, aren't there?
Absolutely endless opportunities and pathways for students. I mean, you have the post-leaving cert course. I know a lot of students were offered places last week on the round 0 CAO based on the results that they got in their post-leaving cert course that they would not have got last year with their leaving cert points. So it's a wonderful wonderful opportunity. The apprenticeship courses, that's another very good route now, and that's building all the time, and more places and more exciting courses coming available. I mean, it is definitely not too late to look at those. They're still recruiting right until the end of September and even up to mid-October in some cases.
Talk to me about studying abroad now, because a lot of people traditionally might have gone up north or to the UK.
Yes.
Has Brexit affected that, and is it better to study in Europe financially, or what way is it working now?
Well, it depends. Like the fees in the UK had risen astronomically even before COVID. But for students, say, I know students who are studying up north now, if you do physiotherapy or occupational, any of the therapies up north are actually free for southern students to apply to and to do. There are no fees at all. So, you know, if there are therapy, it's free in the north of Ireland, and the points are less as well. So it's worth looking on clearing. They have a UCAS clearing if there are places still available on those courses. Sometimes there may be.
Yeah,
you can still do that.
For students who are staying in Ireland and maybe now, you know, they find out this morning they've gotten their dream course and they face into going to college and all of the expense that comes with that, are there financial supports available for students in Ireland?
Well, it's the SUSI grant is the most common support. That is means tested based on the income at home and how many students are there. But it isn't too late to apply. By applying now, you'll probably get it a little bit later than you would have had you applied earlier, but you will definitely, if you're entitled to it, you just log on to susi.ie, and also on the Parents Helpline. They usually have somebody from SUSI there to answer any questions that you might have about those financial supports.
Now, there's going to be Leaving Cert students, of course, a ball of stress this morning, but a bigger ball of stress often are the parents who actually lose the run of themselves, are roaring around the place and stressing the hell out of their kids. So we cop on parents, first of all, and second of all, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, look, this is their day now. It's their Leaving Cert result. They've achieved a lot to get this far. It is no party. And, you know, just to be there to support them. And, you know, make sure you let them know that these results do not define the people that they are or will become, you know, and they're just one little kink on the road. And sometimes, if they are disappointed, sometimes a little bump on the road just puts us right back on track again, you know. So I would say it's not the be-all and end-all. You won't be asked for your Leaving Cert results once you've got your college course or your PLC or your apprenticeship. Nobody will ever ask you again what you got in your Leaving Cert. So it's just a little moment in time, but it can be a very stressful moment.
And I suppose if you didn't get what you want as well, there's ways and means of getting to there with our education. You can nearly start off at a PLC course and end up a professor if you want to.
You absolutely could. Or you could even start off with the Accounting Technicians of Ireland studying accountancy and go straight in immediately on the blended learning apprenticeship route, being paid a salary, and work your whole way up a chartered accountant, you know.
There's so many options.
It's worth your while chatting to somebody to see what your options are, really.
Absolutely.
Because the results day is not the be-all and end-all, even though it might seem it.
Certainly isn't.
Thank you so much once again.
welcome.
The voice of reason. Betty, I love having you on, I have to say.
Thank you.
Might come back for the old CEO results as well to give a bit of hope there. Now, of course, supports for students who are feeling anxious, overwhelmed or down about the results can be found at the National Parents Council. Just search ncp.ie.
Still to come this morning, Star Trek legend Robert Picardo joins us in the flesh.
Not a hologram. Plus, oh Lord, I'm known to be Ireland's worst chef. I'm not the worst. I'm not great, like. So today I'm attempting to cook a Thai curry for the crew. I found out about this yesterday, by the way. I am not a happy bunny, but sure, stay tuned if you want to see me make an apple each to myself once again. Bye. It's a mixed bag across your morning papers. And we'll start with the Irish Times, which leaves with the majority of Leaving Cert grades artificially inflated. The paper reports that most of this year's Leaving Cert students' grades have been artificially inflated by exam authorities to bring them into line with record highs of recent years.
The Irish Independent leads with Senior Gardai face down McEntee in row over top job. The paper reports that Senior Gardai have sought to face down Justice Minister Helen McEntee in a row over pension rules that has caused chaos in filling the role of Deputy Commissioner.
We are forgotten about. We have no one to turn to as the lead in the Irish Examiner. It's reporting that parents and students of St Killian's Special School have demanded the government restore therapeutic services to their Cork school.
On to the tabloids now, and the Daily Mail leads with move on land tax needed to save budget. The paper reports that the race is on to solve the crisis in the coalition over the controversial shelving of the land hoarding tax, which could jeopardise the giveaway budget. The paper also carries a photograph of Match of the Day and the One Show presenter Jermaine Genius, who has been sacked by BBC over inappropriate text to a colleague.
Revealed, that's the front page of the Irish Daily Mirror. The paper reports that triple killer Samir Syed took his own life just hours after he was told he was fit to stand trial for the murder of his wife and children.
The Sun leads with its Showtime, reporting that broadcaster Gráinne Seoige has bagged enough nominations from Fianna Fáil members to be a party candidate at the next general election.
Knock Enoch, who's there, is the lead in the Irish Daily Star. It's reporting that Enoch Burke has returned to a secondary school in Westmeath despite losing a High Court action aimed at setting aside an order for him to stay away.
And finally, the Herald leads with 7-man gang of burglars hit Dublin home. The paper carries a story of a Dublin family who have told how a gang of 7 masked intruders tried to burgle their home yesterday. Now up next, as more and more Irish businesses continue to shut their doors, we discuss the country's hospitality crisis. That's after this quick break. Fáiltí Arashka, Ireland AM. Now, this week, iconic bar and restaurant Yukio was the latest victim to shut its doors due to Dublin's rising hospitality costs. Not only that, almost 600 Irish food service businesses were forced to close this year, with many calling out to the government to make the hospitality industry that bit much more sustainable.
And joining us to discuss is the owner of Yukio, Duncan Maguire, along with President of the Restaurant Association of Ireland, Paul Lenihan. Thank you both so much for joining us. First off, Duncan, I'm really sorry to hear about Yukio. I can only imagine this week has been really difficult. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, still very raw. We're very upset. You know, we've been there 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to say goodbye to our staff, to our customers. You know, it's pretty tragic for us, you know, as a family as well.
Yes.
5 of our family are employed there.
So how was it a slow end? Did it fizzle out, or are the doors fully shut and that's it?
It's one of those things that is happening slowly for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's very sudden at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I have to say, I'm really sad to hear this, Duncan. I frequented Yukio many a night down in the basement for a boogie. It was such a great establishment in the city centre. In your goodbye post that you posted on Instagram announcing this, you mentioned that during the 20 years you've been in business, you went through a pandemic, a stock market crash and lots of bumps in the road. Has it been hard to stay afloat, or when did it get increasingly harder? It's just gotten harder over the years. When I opened first, and myself and Paul were just talking about this, when we opened first, you know, you looked at your account a few times a week. Now, over the last few years, particularly since COVID, but I mean, it's a trend that's been growing over the last few years, we're living day to day. We're living day to day and checking the account and really just paddling to keep the thing afloat on a daily basis. And I suppose what I wanted to really kind of touch on was how, you know, the effect of the 4% is really just it's not just an arbitrary number. Mm-hmm. It has a concrete effect every week. How much it costs us every week to pay those bills, and they're not costs that we had many years ago. Mm-hmm. Energy, all of the other the bumps that we've faced over the last few years.
Mm. It's so disappointing and heartbreaking when it ends in closure, and the really horrible thing is that this is actually a common story. Paul, I know that this week has seen a very similar story for the Rustic Stone, Brasserie 66, both Dublin establishments and restaurants that people know and love.
Yeah, look, it's happening throughout the country. In every small town, village, there's cafes, small restaurants. You know, there's just been so many closures, and at the moment there's been quite a few big profile ones now that have been highlighted. It is having a disastrous effect on just the landscape, the overall, the whole hospitality sector, and we're in grave danger. We're heading down a very slippery slope where, unfortunately, we're going to see an awful lot more unless the government step up and help us. Yeah, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. Like, what is going on here? Is the model broken? Is it just the fat? What is it that you see? The model is completely broken, and I think that's kind of it's a good kind of phrase that's been used lately. The model is definitely broken. You know, for years, it's never been a high margin business anyway, you know, but it's been a consistent business where cash flow was regular, came in every week, and you still were able to do your week-to-week trade. But our margins have just been absolutely decimated. You know, we would have liked to operate in around that 6 to 8% years ago. At the end of the week, at the end of the year, but that has been eroded down to, in a lot of cases, below zero or just above zero. And you cannot afford to be at just above zero in our sector, because anything from a washing machine to to an oven goes down, your capex to try and get that back up running is huge. It's that small. So that 4.5% that was brought back in last year's budget is a huge part of what our margin needs to be and where it's at, because all the other costs over the last few years, you know, the wage inflation, the energy costs, the food costs, we could go on, the insurance costs, we could go on and go on and go on. They have just accumulated since 2019 that now we're at a point that our margin is zero. And we cannot sustain, and the industry can't sustain, if we keep going the way we're going.
And I think what's extra worrying about this is, you know, it's not, I understand for rural, you know, towns and places that this is, you know, they're not getting the same footfall. But like, these are Dublin city centre restaurants, you know, so even with that, it isn't enough to sustain a business to stay open.
No, absolutely not. And that, again, we need, I mean, you're going to look, we often get people saying to us and going, but you're busy, your restaurants are busy, we're looking at your restaurants. I've seen politicians say it to us at various meetings, you're busy. And we said, yes, we are. We're all extremely, extremely busy. But at the end of the day, we're busy fools. And it's just because the margin has been eroded in so many different places. If it was just the 4.5% and not the food costs and not the energy costs and the wage costs that we experienced in 2019, we'd probably be sitting here, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it's the culmination of all of the costs together has meant that our business is not sustainable.
Duncan, as well as the VAT increase, what do you think are the other factors that are affecting establishments like this? I mean, we look at Dublin city centre, what we've seen is kind of hotels, student accommodation popping up. Is there enough of the culture? Is there enough emphasis on bringing our, I don't know, Irish people into the city? Like, is there too much of an emphasis on tourism, and can we survive on tourism alone?
We can't just survive on tourism alone. I mean, we're housing tourists in apartments, and we're housing our homeless and people who need accommodation in hotels. And so there's no 3-star hotels available in the city. Yes, we're getting more Americans than English tourists for the first time, or British tourists for the first time ever. But that's not what the model is all about. We need people living in their city centres. There's nowhere for them to live. It's not just about cost of living, like the increases in the cost of, like in the minimum wage, are because people can't afford to live close to work. I need kitchen porters, I need cleaners, I need people doing those manual labour jobs. They can't afford to live anywhere near work. They have to commute an hour and a half to the outskirts of the city, to the outer counties, to be able to afford to actually live somewhere. And so every time somebody gets a rent increase, the first person they come to is me, and they say, I can't afford to pay my rent, I need more money. If I don't get more money, I'm gone. So I have to pay that money. And
people have been shouting about this for years. Deaf ears.
Yeah. I mean, like when I was their age and I was starting out in the business, my rent was a fifth or a sixth of my wage. It's now for young people, my kids who are in their 20s, it's 40 to 60% of their wage.
And I think it's such a good point you're making, because, you know, the restaurant scene is one thing, but for young people, for people trying to socialise, like, is the nightlife a dying scene as well? People can't afford, or it's not accessible to be in the city centre and socialising late into the night.
Well, it's not, and it's not just about VAT 9, and it's not. We need progressive licensing laws.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm a late bar, and probably my late bar has you know, sounded the death knell for nightclubs, because nightclubs can't survive on 2 hours of trade. Nobody can survive on 2 hours.
Do you think nightlife is dead, that scene?
Well, we need licensing laws that actually reflect the modern world that we're in. Our licensing laws go back to common law, sometimes back into the 18th century.
Yeah.
There's, you know, the theatre licence, which is there since the late 1700s. You know. Nobody has rewritten this legislation.
I know.
People like Michael McDowell came along, tried to do stuff. He changed words.
Yeah.
He changed words in the Constitution. 10 years ago, whatever it was, 15 years ago.
So what do you want to see happening, Paul? How can we change this?
Well, look, our culture has changed. More and more people have been going out to eat in the last few years than they ever did. I mean, we've seen, unfortunately, the demise of the Irish pub for years, but what's happened is a lot of pubs doing food have kind of picked up the baton and carried it on. So the place for people to go out and socialise has always been now a pub restaurant or restaurants. And our restaurant scene is flourishing. We've had so many good restaurants come into Ireland over the last few years, and the sector has been quite strong. But when you see what's happening at the moment, there's just nothing in it to be, there's nothing for anybody to make at it. Nobody would sit down in front of a bank with a proposal and say, you know, I want to get into the restaurant business, because you'd be told, absolutely no, we're not supporting that. And that is going to get worse and worse and worse. So what we need is quite a simple transaction to be done by the government. It was a VAT rate of 9%, which we had for 10 of the previous 12 years, don't forget. So many businesses set up in the last 10 to 12 years that their VAT rate was 9%. So they built that into the margin when they were pricing menus and whatnot. So you can't really expect all those people who set up in 2012, 14, 16 to throw on that extra 4.5% and it to be all right, because all the other costs have gone up with it. So it's just made it so uncompetitive and just not sustainable. So what we need, we're asking the government, we really need that 4.5% to be brought back down. 9% is the right percent VAT rate on food, and it will completely change the landscape at the moment. It will give people be able to sustain more sustainability, and it will save jobs, protect our livelihoods, protect their culture that is so synonymous with us here in Ireland. And the whole Céad Míle Fáilte, if you want to call it.
I know.
Well, there you go.
I know. Where is it gone? Paul and Duncan, thank you so much for joining us.
Jeremy Lamago.
Thank you very much.
Guys,
thank you.
Up next, it is the moment we've all been waiting for, but especially Elaine. Star Trek icon Robert Picardo is with us in just a few minutes. Stay with us. Now, since he first materialised on our screens in 1995 as the Voyager's fan favourite Doctor, Robert Picardo has been synonymous with Star Trek for generations of fans across the world.
I'm trying to calm myself here. Yes, Robert Picardo is in Ireland for this week's Dublin Comic-Con extravaganza. But before we speak to him, let's take a look back at the Doctor known for his heart of gold and peculiar treatments. Robert, not your usual bedside manner, really.
No. What a terrible clip to show. That was one of the evil other episodes, you know, where I've been possessed by something else. Ignore that, folks. That's not the real me.
It isn't the real you, because you have been beloved for generations because of your character, which is a holographic doctor for people who may not be familiar with it, but a very special place in everyone's heart, because it's almost like the man and the boy, and is he real, is he not real, where's his heart, is there emotions? It's a lovely character to play.
Well, there's been an explosion of interest in artificial intelligence the last 2 years, and I guess people have woken up to the fact that Brent Spiner playing Data on The Next Generation and my character on Voyager were really the first popular artificial intelligence characters in American television. I've been interviewed by a researcher at Harvard Medical School because my character was so influential to him growing up with the concept of artificial intelligence in medicine. So I think I'm finally getting the respect I deserve.
Absolutely. Now, luckily for us, you are in Dublin this weekend for Dublin Comic-Con. How often do you attend these fan conventions?
Well, I haven't been in Dublin for 10 years. And it really depends. I mean, obviously, during the COVID pandemic, they all went away. And there was also a period of time thereafter where people were, you know, a little nervous about being at large congregant events again. But they're back full force now. And I would say I attend conventions probably 4 or 5 times a year. Love to come to beautiful places like Dublin rather than just going to New Jersey, which is a beautiful place too.
No offense, New Jersey.
It's fun. It is fun to see the great cities of the world, and I feel, you know, grateful that Star Trek has provided that opportunity and so many others in my life.
Star Trek as a franchise, as a show, it's beloved to so many people. It's got a hugely loyal fan base. And your character as well, the Doctor, what do you think makes it so popular and so almost zealous the fans are about it?
I think it's the core message of optimism for humanity's future in space, that humanity will not only survive, it'll flourish in the future. And in difficult times and highly politicized, technology could empower us without destroying us. So I think it's that essential optimism that keeps drawing people back. And a lot of fans say that watching Star Trek got them through difficult times in their lives, which is always very gratifying.
Comfort, yeah. If you look at what the themes are as well, I suppose it would be unpopular to put the direct portrayal of it on television, but doing it through a science fiction world, be it homosexuality, be it racism, anything like that. If you put it in that kind of set in outer space, you can deal with these themes, and that's what Star Trek did so well and does so well.
I agree. A famous Deep Space Nine episode, a trill are the symbiotes that live inside another being. But if you recall, there was an episode where the two characters were in love, but it was a male trill inside a female body. So it had a kiss between two women. But the essential message was, if two people are in love, it doesn't matter, you know, what sex they are. You're free to love whomever you want. But Star Trek had a way of framing that, as you say, in a way that kind of depoliticized it, made it about the core message, which is people who love each other rather than whether, you know, whether people of the same sex loving each other is offensive to some people.
And if we look right back, is it true that there was some uncertainty about whether you would even audition for this part?
Yes, I read the script. I was doing a play at the time. I was busy working. I said to my agent, I don't have time to read it. I read this. It said a computer program of a doctor, colorless, humorless. Does that sound like a bucket of fun to you? So meanwhile, I read for Neelix instead. Because
I can't believe you read for Neelix. I'm stunned when I read that.
I thought it was funnier, and I'm thinking he's an alien, little rubber ears like Spock, right? I didn't know that it was, because when my agent called and said, he wants to know, how long will he be in the makeup chair? And they said, we'll get back to you. Okay. And then they got back and said, more than 15 minutes. Well, 3.5 hours a day is more than 15 minutes. It's not like they lied.
No.
They just gave you... So in any case, I actually auditioned for Neelix, came this close to getting it. This close. I was... The way I heard it, the producers actually wanted me in the studio, wanted the other actor, Ethan Phillips, who is a great friend of mine, but I didn't know he was my competition. I was unaware. And then he got that role. They came back and said, would you please read for the role we were originally interested in you? There's something about your voice. And I thought, I don't know, I don't understand it at all. I don't really know Star Trek, but I'll take a shot at it. And my young children who grew up watching me have said, now that they're adults, they said, Dad, the key to your success as the doctor is your resting bitch face. My own children said this. Am I allowed to say that on morning television?
You can.
When my face is at rest, I look unhappy. I just do. Now, growing up, I smiled all the time in front of them, but then when they watched me on television, they thought, this guy doesn't look happy at all. And, you know, so
maybe I should be on Star Trek now. That's brilliant.
No, but your own children to tell you. And they were right, but it took me that long to figure it out. I had to have them grow up and explain to me.
But your character, because the fact that you became the Doctor, who is a hologram, you've got longevity like no other character in Star Trek. Really, perhaps maybe Data, and he is finite as well. So there's new exciting things ahead for you. Tell us about that.
As soon as I'm through this wonderful trip here in Ireland, after I leave Dublin and see the wild Atlantic coast and other points of interest, I will fly back to New York for 12 hours, then on to Toronto, and I will start shooting Starfleet Academy, which is the newest of the Star Trek live-action series. I'm the next legacy actor after Patrick Stewart to be put in the original cast of a new show. It features Holly Hunter, the great Academy Award-winning actress, as the Chancellor of Starfleet Academy. Season 1 villain is Paul Giamatti, which I couldn't be more excited.
Amazing.
He is a spectacular actor and a delightful human being. And then this incredible cast of young actors, all of whom I've met, all of whom I've read through the first couple shows with, that are just extraordinary talents and very diverse, because one of Star Trek's key core messages is diversity and inclusion in the future. And this is just a wonderful group of young actors that are all extraordinarily talented. So I'm very excited to start, and that's the first thing I'll do as soon as I'm back in the States.
Can I ask you about Seth MacFarlane's The Orville? I loved The Orville. It was meant to be, I feel like, a comedic take on Star Trek, but it kind of turned very genuine after a couple of episodes. What was it like to work on? Was it similar to Star Trek or a completely different production?
Well, Seth is a genius, there's no doubt about it, and he actually was in discussion about taking over the Star Trek franchise.
Really?
He pitched CBS, and apparently I think CBS was a little nervous, maybe about his comic sensibility. So then he went off and created his own science fiction show, which a lot of Star Trek fans and a lot of science fiction fans in general love. It was great to guest star on it. I was on twice, and the second time I had a very emotional episode because I was the father of the woman who was the security person on the show, who was leaving, I think, at the end of that season. In any case, it was a great experience. I got to work with my wonderful Star Trek colleague, John Billingsley, who played Dr. Phlox on Enterprise. So it was a great experience. I think the show is very creative.
Yeah. Before you leave us, I'm going to have to ask about this pin that you have on your collar, which represents something very special.
It does indeed. This is the Planetary Society. It is the world's leading advocacy group for space exploration, co-founded by Carl Sagan in 1980. So we have our 45th anniversary next year. It's run by the great Bill Nye the Science Guy now, who's an icon in America for getting more than 2 generations of young people interested in science in our country. And I've been an ambassador to the science fiction community for more than 25 years for the Planetary Society. In fact, I promised anyone who comes to the convention, the Dublin Comic Con convention this weekend, and proves to me that you've just joined the Planetary Society, you'll get a free selfie with me because I love our group. It inspires space fans around the world. If you are a space fan and you want to be part of an international community of people who feel like you got to join the Planetary Society.
You will be inundated this weekend, I'm sure, with that. I might be there myself.
You absolutely will now, with bells on.
I get my selfie now.
Yeah.
I leave you alone. But I will join. It's such a wonderful organisation. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks.
Great to see
you.
you.
It's a pleasure to meet both of you. Thank you.
A reminder that you can meet Robert at Dublin Comic Con this weekend, with tickets still available at dublincomiccon.com.
Up next, a bit of a come down for me. On kitchen duties, I'm attempting to serve up a Thai curry and I can't cook. This is great fun altogether. See you after the break. Stop laughing.
Now, Fáilte Raj, this weekend marks the Dalkey Lobster Festival, where a whole host of celebs will be trying their hand at a bit of cooking, including our very own Elaine. Elaine, you've got the claws out.
To get in a bit of practice, I said, and why I say I, not me, my producer said, we'd make the crew's breakfast, but they shouldn't worry because, thanks be to God, Chef Aaron Capel from the Green Saffron is here to talk me through it. What am I making?
You're making a beautiful Thai green curry, lobster Thai green curry.
OK, how does one do this?
So, really simple here. You've got your pan nice and hot, I presume, Elaine.
How hot should it be? Midway?
Midway. Just
it's
a little
5
bit more
now.
Midway. Yeah, just go to 6 or 7.
Okay. Yes, it's at 7.
OK.
You look great. Can I say the apron first of all?
Just call me Nigella. I shall show you my onions. They are very sexy.
Before the onions, let's do the oil. You need to heat your oil up first. Yeah.
And this is hairy hot chili oil.
Do you know what I mean?
Delicious.
Sounds great, doesn't it?
My hairy hot chili oil.
Because Thai is all about a bit of heat,
How much?
A bit of background.
How much?
Just keep going.
A drizzle.
That's plenty.
OK.
OK, then ideally, I don't know how long we've got really, but
stay going. You're doing fabulous, yeah.
So let's add the onions straight away. We've got 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Very good.
Sizzle, sizzle.
Yeah, give them a little... There we are now.
Sorry, I'm loving the dancing with it.
This is what
You're putting your full body into the Elaine.
Fully committed.
Fully committing, yeah.
Right, onions, what?
Yeah, so they will soften down, but whilst they're doing that, do you want to grab a spoon and maybe you see that the red stuff there? That's the Thai paste. So it's not a green curry, sorry.
Red
it's a red
stuff?
curry. Yeah,
OK.
The red curry, yeah.
So that much?
Yeah, big, yeah. Perfect.
More?
Dollop.
Yeah, maybe a bit more than that as well. Lovely. Brilliant. Loads of flavour. So that's got all the dry...
So what is that? That's a red Thai paste and you can just buy that in a shop. You don't make that.
You can buy that in a shop and look, you clearly make your own, but that's a much more simple way to do it. So no, fantastic. Mix all around until they're all
That's the technical term, is it?
To be fair, Elaine, you can't go wrong because everything is measured out and in a tub. You literally just need to chuck.
So you would
but Elaine was backstage.
So you would think. I have exploded boiled eggs. Anyway.
So that's cool. We're doing really well. So the next thing
burning.
is you see
is
the
it burning?
Okay. If it would take the heat down a little, maybe, if you feel it's burning.
OK, what's next?
But that's cool. So you see the lumps in that little...
These lumps?
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
Technically, I'm adding the lumps.
Yeah.
What are the lumps?
That's palm sugar.
Your lovely lumps.
All it just goes in.
And that might be a bit sweet, so maybe just half, say, a third of that. A couple of lumps, as you would like.
Two Elaine's lovely lumps have been added.
Louise, you said that, not me. I think that's okay for you to say. So. Lovely. And then let's get straight on with the coconut milk to help that sort of, because those lumps of sugar. Yeah.
This is coconut milk, and just throw it all in.
All of it in. Now be careful. Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Good woman.
Sorry. No, I've done it gradually.
I was going to say because it was normally some stuff thick layer and then all the liquid underneath, but no.
So she's now creamed up the lumps.
She's creamed up the lumps. She has indeed. Yeah. Now she's tenderly massaging them around, which is fantastic.
Tenderly massaging
coming
around
together
the
very
lumps.
nicely.
Yes.
Okay, so what have we got in there? Oh, next you need to add like a bit more flavour. So you've got a base flavour of all your beautiful paste, your dry shrimp and all that lot.
And now here we have an array
of different things.
Do
you see the liquid one just in front
this
of
one?
that one there? Do you know what that is? That's got quite a pungent.
Oh, that's fish sauce.
There you are.
Delish.
Oh, good woman. Just put it all in there. Why not?
Oh, I thought it was measured up precisely.
It is very precise measurements.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's smelling great now, though.
It really is. It's probably the most wonderful curry anyone ever had.
Yeah.
Do you know, you might turn the heat up a little bit, I'd say, Elaine, because we need to see a few bubbles here.
Yeah. And we've only about 4 minutes left.
Okay, right. What's
so
next?
Let's go in with the ginger. Do you see the little strips that Chris is really beautiful? This is Chris's recipe, by the way.
This isn't ginger.
Is
that ginger? Lemongrass.
Oh, lemongrass as well. Okay.
Watch your French manicure as well. Ginger turns that yellow.
I knew a thing. Lemongrass. All of it?
Yeah. Yeah, why not? Because really, you see ginger and lemongrass.
See, I mightn't be good at cooking Thai stuff, but I've eaten plenty of it, and I can recognise lemongrass.
What we need to do now is this is all about a lobster curry, so maybe we put our lobster in. You see here.
What about the rest of the stuff?
Well, we'll put that in at the end. You see.
Just what am I putting in? This bit?
So just the thing with the claw first, because that should have like a little.
Claws and all.
Claws and all.
It's
like, do you know what I mean? It's like bungling.
Hang on a second. Now we're bubbling a lot. Should this be bubbling this much?
Turn it down a little.
Put it in and turn it down.
It down, yeah.
It's a celebration, Elaine. Did you get that?
Do you see now? You said I've come up with no puns so far.
Come on.
It's very good. Okay, so now what we need to do we have a plate or anything?
Okay.
Will
you tell us while Elaine is making a great job of this
what else am I putting this stuff in?
That goes in right towards the end because it's so delicate. It literally only needs a minute.
Oh, really?
So you've got other flavourings there as well. Do we have a plate to plate up? But that would be really.
We do. But could you tell us as we're talking about the Lobster Festival, the reason we're here and why we're cooking lobster?
The most amazing thing.
I know about the Lobster Festival.
You're doing fabulous. Keep going.
Am I adding anything else in?
Keep throwing things in. Yeah,
all of these things.
And it's going to be served over rice and the beautiful. Don't put the pak choi in. The Dorky Lobster Festival is an amazing festival. It's done for a charity. So each year we come up. There's a few of us chefs.
I'm just getting plates. Keep telling me.
Fantastic.
Yes. All lobsters.
Yeah, all lobsters. We all do different takes on lobster dishes. Basically, it's such a fun.
I don't even know how to open the drawers.
Fun afternoon. The whole street is converted into different stalls, lobsters and different beautiful foods. All the restaurants are open. It's a delicious. Really cool atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's for the RNLI this year, so it's all for a very, very good cause. Such fun. My wife, for the first time ever, is coming up, which will be fantastic because I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. No, it's just a fabulous thing.
Do you know what I love about a lobster curry? Some people are scared of lobster eating it. Do you know they see the fish?
Stuff?
No, that's gorgeous.
What is this?
Delicious.
No, that's perfect. That's
what is
basil, and that adds beautiful flavour.
Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy.
Do we add any? No, we didn't. The kaffir lime leaves. So you just.
I did. I put loads. I put too much in, so
You're taking a few out.
There's a lot going on in fairness there.
Yeah, no. Now what we need to do is maybe just get some pak choi from the box over there. Pop it onto a plate.
Okay.
No, they're the green beans.
They go in there as well. That's perfect.
Is this pak choi? No.
The pak choi is in the buska. Come on, I'm telling you, doing well here now.
What are the? Oh, they're blanch too.
Two go into the curry as well.
Oh,
sorry, what am I doing here exactly? Put one of those onto the plate. Lovely. Just up, lovely. That's perfect.
Lovely.
Honestly, you're doing amazingly.
Put your tail in, your tail.
Tail in.
Into the lobster.
Into the curry, yeah.
Stick in your tails.
Okay, throw it in, that's perfect.
I'm doing all this wrong. Give me the other plate there.
Lumps, bumps, tails. It's all happening.
Looking lovely.
Yeah.
And
I hope we're not doing a recap on this. Here's one we did later. No one's going to want to do this.
Takes no time at all because it's going to keep that lovely crunch to it. The tail takes no time. And when you're ready, just serve up and Bob's your uncle.
Okay.
Serve up meaning pour.
Are we ready though? Like now?
Oh,
are we ready?
Are we ready? Have you tasted it, Elaine?
I'm not going to taste it yet. I'm not going to eat my own cooking.
Go on, have a little.
Well, we've got to, right?
I mean, do we?
I don't know.
Can we crown Elaine officially? Go on.
I think so.
Go on, give her the crown.
Me with that.
The inaugural lobster crown.
Actually, the presentation is particularly professional.
Do you know what it is? It looks.
Are you taking the?
Elaine, can we just give you also a little crown?
In fairness, get the lumps. Oh, Elaine, honestly, it suits you. You look like you've been doing this all your life.
Aren't you hilarious?
Really? Did you do home ec for the Leaving Cert?
I did actually. I got a really good mark.
So you're cooking at the Dorky Festival as well, aren't you, on Sunday?
Apparently.
Elaine's
I'm cooking this at the Dorky Festival. Where'll I put it?
Right here, look. Up here, they're gorgeous.
It smells amazing.
We'll get it for the
Chris's
crab.
recipe is
anyone going to taste it?
Yes. We will off the camera.
Yes.
I'm going to taste it myself.
Well done, Elaine. Done a run. A reminder that the Dalkey Lobster Festival runs across the weekend, and you can obviously catch this delicious recipe online as well, but do be sure to pop on down for a taste of Elaine's Thai seafood special. I'll just say, if you dare, though.
I put way too much seasoning of everything. Yeah. There's too much fish sauce, there's too much ginger, there's too much everything. Portions.
Well, you look great.
Oh, sorry. I'm sure it'll be better on Sunday.
That was an experience. Well done, Elaine. Coming up tomorrow, she became an overnight star when she performed her version of the Saw Doctor's classic hit N17 on TV. Singer Tolu McKay will be joining us. Plus, as kids return back to school next week, welcome back, guys. We've advice on how you can help your little ones readjust to this next phase.
I put way too much stuff in that. I think I'm having a hot flash. We're being warned to close our windows. Windows. As spider season returns, we have advice on ridding our homes of our 8-legged friends.
All of that, plus bridal wear on the catwalk, and we're making American-style peach pie in the kitchen. We're back tomorrow from 9.
How was that, Elaine?
It's delicious. You know what? I don't, when they realise I can't cook, I can't season or anything. Everything has to be precisely measured, or I make a mess. Did you see how much ginger I threw into that?
The fish sauce was heavy-handed. It was a heavy pour. It was a heavy pour of the fish sauce.
Lots of flavours was going on there.
Yeah.
Lots of flavours.
I love the drama. Every time you threw something in, you were like, whoo.
Yeah.
It was like you were dancing at the same time.
Do you know what? It's actually a shame I don't have my own cooking show.
It is.
Cooking for dummies. You can see it now.
This is your pitch.
We will see you tomorrow, guys.
I will.
We will. We're going to have a taste now off camera. Thanks, guys. Have a great Friday.
Long.